Hey, welcome back to the shithole I call my workbench. So today we're going to be covering the transmission side of the AF18 build. These are the bits that I have left over from just random builds that I've done. I've got a Malossi wing bell, Malossi delta clutch. This is a TWH DOZX pulley. I have it on the straight ramps right now. This is a Ruckus, I believe. Malossi variator, and I'm running the stock DO drive face. So there is a few things you got to do to these to install the larger ZX pulleys on them. And if you want to run the larger variators in the front as well, there's also some mods that need to be done. For those of you with the keen eye, you'll notice this 3D printed intake. Hopefully going to have a video up about this shortly that will have the STL that you can download and print this on your own if you want to do that. I'm also going to have a Stage6 clutch plate for the front here that you can take to a laser and get cut out yourself, or plasma or water jet or whatever you have. I'll provide a DXF and then you can modify it. When you run that pulley set up on a Honda, the sheath gets in the way, so it doesn't open all the way, so you lose your top speed. You can shim it out really far, but then the clutch discs don't ride in the right spot. So my solution was to make this plate flat and then machine a small groove in the backside to retain the spring. And then you just have to countersink 3 holes and you can bolt the whole thing together. And then you can run the big Peugeot 112mm Stage 6 RT clutches on a Honda and still have full pulley travel. And also in that video, I'm going to be providing the base plate DXF/solid file for the Stage6 RT95 build. And I'll discuss all of the nuances for all of those in the thing. They're provided as is with no warranty implied, yada yada, etc, etc. But back onto this. So we'll start up at the front. We'll start off with this Malossi variator. Like I said, I believe this is for a Ruckus 50. I bought a kit for some reason and I ended up with the variator left over. It does bolt, it does fit on, everything about it works, with the exception of the diameter of it is too big, so you need to clearance the case here. You can see I kind of just took my large porting tool, my electric die grinder, and just clearance this out. You'll just need to knock that out so that it can go all the way back. Once it's able to go back properly, then you're laughing. There's not really too much to that. I am using a stock length. This might just be the provided boss for the variator, and 1 shim. So depending on which belt you're using, your shim can jump from this to this. I'm not using a ZX boss, and I'll tell you why I'm not using a ZX boss. The ZX bosses are longer, and they're meant for the ZX belts, which are wider than these. This is a weird belt that I have that still has some life in it, so I'm going to throw this one on there for a little while. It's a KN Planning, slightly longer than stock belt, and it's also the regular belt width, so the ZX belts are slightly wider. So that's why I'm using this boss and then a shim. What I like to do for sizing the belt, just to get me in the ballpark, because you're probably still going to have to play with it after anyway, but this is just preliminary to get you close. I'll take the belt and I'll fold it around the boss, and I'll see how much of a height difference there is from the bottom part of the V of the belt to the top of the boss, and then I'll shim it accordingly just to start. Again, you're probably going to have to mess with this once it's running, your Sharpie, your pulley, and check everything and see where your belt's riding, but this just gets you close to start with. The other reason why I don't have that fully all the way to the top there is the stock drive face I'm using also has a lip on it. But basically you want to make sure that the the pulley is going back far enough that the belt can hit the very bottom, but isn't all the way back so far that it's only riding on the boss and it's not riding on the tapered face. After you have it running, take a Sharpie marker, make some lines on the variator face, go for a drive, full wide open throttle, see how far the sheath is running up and down. You may have to space this in or out some more. You can also tell if you get really heavy wear marks along the very bottom edge of the pulley, which may indicate that the belt, you have too much shim and it's actually not biting into the pulley on the taper, which could lead to excessive wear of your belts on the sides. So that's something else to kind of take into consideration. But this just gets you close. This gets it so that you can throw the thing together. And as far as variator weights and setups of that sort, I'm using a set of knockoff D sliders, just again because I had them in there in a pretty light weight. But me telling you what weight I'm going to end up using is irrelevant because literally every setup is different. If you use a different contra spring, you have different ramp angles in the sheath, different angles on the drive and driven faces, all that stuff, different ramp plate on the back, everything is going to change. There's no hot setup that just will work. If you have one thing different than anything else from here, it's going to be different. So it's not like it's something that you can just take a recipe and throw together. And there is one more thing I'm going to have to do. When you're running these with the grinder as well, when you're running these pulleys, the belt rides up so high that it rubs along the edge right here and also on this. So you basically need to remove that lump, flatten it out completely, and the same thing here, kind of flatten this out up to the edge of the external case here. And that just, you'll see wear marks on there and also on the belt. This belt actually has some because I didn't go out far enough, but you can see when I used this belt, I had to shave the case back even a little more because the belt was rubbing on the outside of the case as it was operating. So something else to be aware of. You can wreck a belt pretty quick. For the drive face, stock Dio drive face because it's all I have. One thing also to take note of, if you are running a ZX Drive Boss, there are the height differences between the two. ZX, regular. You have to be very aware of how much engagement you have on the driven face. If you start to shim that out, you can actually end up with almost no engagement of the front pulley, and you can strip this pulley or strip the end of the crank. Some of these seem like they're almost too long, some of the aftermarket ones. I don't know, but this one in particular seemed like it was a bit too long. It would be fine if you turned it down maybe a little bit to get it in the right range. But again, just be aware that that's probably I mean, you might be able to get away with a shim on there too and still get a little bit of engagement, but be very aware that you could strip out the splines on your driven face or the splines on your crank. And most belts are directional. Pay attention to that. I installed this backward once already before. This one has little arrows. So next up, ZX pulley of the TWH brand, Taiwan. Malossi wing bell, Malossi Delta clutch with yellow springs in it, I think. So as I was mentioning earlier, some of these larger bells that have like a lot of external ribbing on them, when you put these on a ZX pulley, there's a rolled lip here that's probably about 1 millimeter or 2 wide. What will happen is that will hit the inside of your pulley. I don't know if you can see any marks on this one, probably not, but what'll happen is that'll keep the pulley from opening all the way. You'll lose belt travel essentially. What I did was I chucked this up in the lathe and turned that lip down You could rig something up with like a drill and a grinding wheel, whatever you have available. But basically you want to roll that lip completely off of there. It's going to make your life a lot better. Your pulley will fully engage the whole way. With this setup in particular, these Malossi wing bells are really bad for running into the back of the pulley. You can see they're almost the same diameter. If you run a stock bell over this, I think it is better a little bit, but it's always something to check before you put the spring in. Put your, mock this up, put the pulley on, make sure that don't even put the clutch on, and make sure that the top of the sheath can come up all the way to basically the top edge of the flats where where the clutch goes up to, and that's almost your full travel. There are other limiting factors there. If you have a really thick spring in there, it'll coil bind. You may not be able to get full travel. If you run those weird Malossi yellow discs for to allow the spring to slip so you don't end up coil binding in that way as well, those can limit your travel. I make those out of Teflon ring. I just make tiny Teflon rings and I put them on the bottom perch just to allow the spring to slide. And just way simpler. It's a lot smaller. It won't keep the clutch from fully engaging, or it won't keep the pulley from fully engaging. So these are all things to are good to take a look at. And then the last thing you want to check is, depending on which clutch you use, you may end up with interference between it and the clutch bell itself. This one, there's quite a bit of room. You may have to shim the bell a little bit by putting shims in here, just on the shaft to space the clutch out. I can show you on the Stage6 one, on the Stage6 RT motor, the distance in between the bell and the clutch is almost 0, so it had to be shimmed out once I put the flat plate mod on it, just so that it would work. But again, this stuff is all easier to do if you don't put your contour spring on there. Just completely rough assemble it without the spring. You can move it in and out. You can see how far it's moving. You can check the travel. You can do it without the clutch on there too. Just put it on, see if the bell is hitting on this lip, if they're interfering, if you're getting full travel. If these lips are also interfering with the edge of the pulley, maybe you can shave the edges. On a lot of these clutches that have the internal ribbing, that's also another thing that will hit, is these little lips on the inside. So it's really good to put this together and just check it over before you actually throw the whole thing on there, just assuming that everything's fine, especially when you're hodgepodging a bunch of different brands together like this too. Just check everything, make sure that everything moves properly. And if you're installing a used bell, wipe the inside out. Also, don't over grease this. Minimal amount of grease in on where the pins are that hold the sheaths together. Make sure the O-rings are good, otherwise you'll fling grease out of here, it'll get inside the cases, get on your belt will slip, you'll have a bad time. But a lot of that grease, if it does fling out, will get flung up inside the bell here. So if you have some brake clean, you can brake clean the inside out. If it's all gouged, maybe a light Scotch-Brite or sandpapering, just directionally, just to kind of clear off the glazing. You can do very lightly sand the pads too, just to break the glaze so it beds in fresh again. And then once you've got all that done, you can install the cases. It can't hurt to quickly take this stuff out, re-grease your kicker cup, re-grease the boss here. These bosses will break most of the time. It's because one of these two components sees, and then it'll actually break the cases on the front here. Also, not running all of the bolts. It's really important to run all of the bolts for these on the front half especially. It will keep you from breaking this case piece in half. So I like running the rear half of the case on there, but obviously you can't do it with this large bell, not stock. However, if you mill this case down to that line the whole way around including taking some off this boss all the way around, it will fit on. I'll go show you on the other scoot that I have. Take it off and show you what I've done to that. I've never seen one of these cases break here, but having this little bit of extra on here probably helps torsionally to keep everything rigid. Whether it helps or not, I don't know. You can cut these out quite a bit, you know, cut slots around here and stuff, and holes up here to help air get in onto the clutch bell and stuff. But I just like running them. It keeps dirt out of them mostly. If it starts to rain and you're riding it, it doesn't start slipping right away, which is also a plus. Because yeah, once water starts getting into the clutch, it has a tendency to not work as well when it's open like that. I have learned from first-hand experience. So I'll go show you on the Stage6 scoot what I've done to that outer clutch cover to make this work. So to make this outer cover go on there and kind of stay in the right spot, I stole one of the alignment dowels out of another front half case and put it in this hole, which is already on the cases, I think, machined, ready to accept it. If not, it may just need, the hole is there big enough, it may just need to be reamed. And then on the cover as well, I reamed out the appropriate hole so it has something to align to. It'd be nice if I could do another one, maybe one of the bottom ones here, but they're, because I had to shave it down to clear the belt, it's not ideal. But as you can see here, I've machined the front of the pulley cover off all the way down. You may need to shave some of these two spots here where the bolts go through. They're kind of clearanced on the outside, but it does fit and doesn't rub. Once it's on there and you get a couple screws in it, it aligns itself and it basically just skirts right over it. And you can fit that Molosi wing bell inside of it, or like this 112mm Stage6 clutch also fits just barely. I probably am going to go around the edges and clearance them out a little bit more. So it looks like this cover has a little bit more casting on the inside, so I'll probably need to take a Dremel tool or something and knock those edges down a bunch to make this work. And I'll have to go out and see if I can find a dowel here. So I'll just be back here in one second. So this is the alignment dowel. It's 10mm. Just so happens I have a 10mm reamer. Don't tell anyone. Basically, I think the case is already 10mm. There was no resistance there at all. And this just needed to be cleared out to 10mm to fit. So it rubs now, but at least now you have a position when you put it back on every single time. It's going to locate there approximately. I mean, you're not using that for critical location. It's more just to, when you put that on there, it's going to hang it in a certain way. And then that way, when you clearance it on these little nubs that stick out, it'll be good to go. And if you want to, you can, you know, put slots up along here and down around the back and in the front here. You could open up the, if you're not running the electric start, you could put a big hole in here to allow air to come in to cool the front and the back and everything. Similar to the Peugeots, they have a front vent which allows cooling air to get in and cool down the whole drivetrain, and then it exits out the back at the bottom. So I apologize as well, I didn't show me putting the transmission, the gear set together, but there's not really anything in there that was anything too spectacular. I did change the bearing and the seal with a bearing that I had here, but that's pretty much it. Everything else is normal. Yeah, there was nothing exciting there. Oh, I also don't use gaskets, I use Honda Bond on the faces in here. It's just easier, it doesn't leak. I've done that a couple times now and had no problems at all. But I think that's it for this video. I've covered pretty much putting the transmission together for the most part. Next video coming up may not be directly related to this. It'll be probably on the 3D printed stuff and the files, so you can make a couple of your own items if you choose to for that Stage6 clutch. So if you wanted to run the big Peugeot clutches on the Hondas, it would give you the file to do that, and then also the files to 3D print these intakes, which use a gas reed block. And I'm also going to include my base plate and other intake files as well, and I'll discuss some issues with them and whatnot. But that's it for this time. Until next time, take care.